The old sewing machine sat in the corner of the veteran's rundown workshop like a forgotten monument to a past no one cared about. Its iron frame rusted, its wooden base scratched, and its faded brand plate barely readable after decades of dust and neglect. And every time his siblings visited, they mocked it with loud laughter, telling him it belonged to the junkyard, calling it useless, worthless, and embarrassing, especially for a grown man who had survived battles overseas but now spent his days mending torn jackets and stitching old canvas instead of having a real job. And each comment cut deeper than the last, because the sewing machine wasn't just a tool to Michael Hayes. It was the last thing his late mother used before cancer took her when he was deployed, leaving him with guilt he would never fully shake off. And though the machine looked broken to everyone else, to him it held the warmth of her hands, her patience, and the gentle voice that once told him that a man who fixes things is a man who understands the world better than those who throw things away. His siblings, Rebecca and James, had no sympathy for that. They cared only about appearances and success, mocking him for living in a small Tennessee cottage with peeling paint, for working odd jobs, for relying on the loyalty of his German shepherd, Ranger, instead of building a family, and for clinging to a machine that they said symbolized failure. But Michael simply swallowed the hurt in silence, focusing on making small repairs for locals who appreciated him far more than his own blood ever had. But beneath that silence was a man carrying invisible scars from war, sleepless nights filled with memories he wished he could forget, loneliness, and the haunting ache of being misunderstood by the very people who should have stood by him, and all that was slowly crushing what remained of his spirit. Until the day Ranger nudged the sewing machine and uncovered a secret that not only changed Michael's life, but exposed the truth about his mother, his family, and a fortune that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and stories that reveal the goodness hidden in unexpected places, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel to help these stories reach more hearts. Michael's days were quiet and predictable, filled with repairing old clothes, stitching backpacks, and restoring torn upholstery for neighbors who couldn't afford new items. And though it wasn't glamorous, it gave him purpose. Ranger stayed by his side every hour, sensing both the peace and the pain in Michael's heart, always alert, always ready, always loyal in a way only a dog who had served alongside a soldier could be. Ranger was trained, disciplined, and deeply bonded with Michael after surviving years of combat operations together. And even in retirement, the dog still had instincts sharper than any humans, reacting to danger, sorrow, or change with unshakable intuition. One windy autumn evening, as leaves scraped across the porch and the sun dipped behind the hills, Ranger began behaving strangely around the sewing machine, circling it with focused eyes, pawing at its side, as if something inside was calling to him, prompting Michael to kneel and check for mice or loose screws. But what he found instead was a tiny metal ring embedded in the wooden base, so small and dusty he had never noticed it before, and when he pulled gently, the entire side panel shifted, revealing a narrow compartment built inside the machine's frame, an intentionally hidden space that had gone untouched for decades, and his breath caught in his chest as he slowly reached in. His fingers brushed against tightly wrapped bundles sealed in wax paper, and inside those bundles were crisp documents, old but perfectly preserved, including legal certificates, bank notices, and government-backed bonds issued in the 1960s and 70s in the name of his mother, Eleanor Hayes, who had apparently purchased and saved them quietly throughout her life. At first the numbers meant nothing to Michael, but as he laid them across the table, the staggering truth unfolded. These were high-yield federal bonds that had grown exponentially over time, and after calculating the totals in disbelief, he realized he was holding over $110 million in matured value. Shock pulsed through him like a physical blow, and he sat frozen while Ranger rested his head on Michael's knee, grounding him with quiet strength as if to say everything was going to be all right. But the emotions tangled inside Michael didn't feel like victory at first. They felt like grief, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of love for a mother who had tried to leave him something enormous, but never got the chance to tell him before she died. And the weight of that truth brought tears he had held back for years. The next days were a whirlwind as he met with bankers, attorneys, and financial inspectors who confirmed the bonds were authentic, legally valid, and worth far more than he initially calculated. And as news spread quietly through town, his siblings quickly returned, not with cruelty this time, but with forced smiles, greedy eyes, and shaky excuses for past behavior. They demanded explanations, insisted the money be split, claimed they had equal rights, and even tried to guilt him by saying their mother had obviously intended the bonds for the entire family. But Michael had already discovered the truth in the documents. Every bond was signed intentionally to him alone, and hidden letters revealed that Eleanor knew Michael would face the hardest road of all, that he would return from war changed in ways others might never understand. And she wanted to ensure he would one day have security, healing, and peace. Reading her words shattered him and healed him at the same time, giving him a closure he never expected to have. And he realized that protecting her wishes was now his duty. His siblings' anger grew, turning into entitlement and bitterness, but Michael refused to fight with them. Instead, he offered them kindness in the form of small financial gifts and emotional forgiveness, telling them he wanted peace, not conflict. Some people in town praised him. Others whispered that he should have taken revenge. But Michael felt free for the first time in years, choosing to honor his mother not through wealth but through compassion, because money had never been the real inheritance. Love was. With the fortune secured in his name, Michael transformed his life not with extravagance but with quiet purpose. He renovated the cottage, built Ranger a comfortable heated shelter beside the porch, and purchased land to build a large community workshop where veterans and struggling families could learn skills, sew clothes, repair items, and rebuild their lives in the same way Michael once stitched broken fabric into something useful again. He named it the Eleanor Center for Renewal, honoring the mother whose hidden sacrifice had changed everything. And soon the center became a living beacon of hope for people who had lost their way. Ranger became the unofficial guardian of the place, moving calmly among visitors, comforting anxious veterans with gentle nudges, and watching children play in the yard with the soft patience of a seasoned soldier who finally found peace. Neighbors who once overlooked Michael now admired him deeply, seeing him as a man who turned wealth into warmth, not pride. And though he donated millions anonymously to hospitals, shelters, and veteran support programs, he still lived simply, wearing worn boots, drinking morning coffee by the window, and whispering thanks to the memory of the mother who never stopped loving him. The sewing machine, once mocked relentlessly, was placed in a glass display at the center, polished and restored, surrounded by framed letters and photos of Eleanor, with a plaque that read, "Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden inside the things we refuse to let go of." As the years passed, Michael often walked to the valley at sunset with Ranger trotting beside him, reflecting on how life had shifted from pain and loneliness to purpose and connection, and he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace, genuine peace, the kind that settles into a man's bones when he finally knows he is living exactly as he was meant to. He thanked God often, not for the money, but for the clarity, the forgiveness, and the second chance at life that had arrived in the most unexpected way, hidden inside an old sewing machine that everyone had called worthless. And every time he looked at Ranger, he whispered quiet gratitude for the dog, who had sensed what he could not, reminding him that loyalty and love can bring light to even the darkest places. Before we close this emotional journey, if this story touched your heart, please comment, share, and subscribe so more people can feel the power of stories filled with hope and second chances. And now, before the ending, please comment below which moment of the story moved you the most, because your words inspire me to create more stories full of heart and meaning.